Babysitters, what seemingly normal parents had dark secrets. Story 1. I nannied for a wealthy couple. She was a surgeon, he was an architect, and the husband had a study in the house that the wife joked about never being allowed in. Now, I'm a nosy effer, and I was curious about why you wouldn't let someone in a study, especially since it looked like a fairly normal room. Big desk, walls covered in bookshelves, books on architecture everywhere. So one day I just roamed around in there. I didn't really find anything, and I was kind of disappointed, but then I grabbed a book off one of the shelves. The thing had money pressed between its pages, about $500 if I had to guess. Picked up another book, found the same thing. I think I checked like 10 different books and every single one had money hidden in it. Still not sure if the dude was just paranoid about banks or if he was intentionally hiding money from his wife. Story 2. I nannied for this very rich family with 3 kids from the West Coast who would come to South Florida for summer vacation every year. The mother was in her 30s, clearly had her kids when she was young and was very stereotypically hot, blonde, thin, perfect teeth. Her husband was a little older, salt and pepper, super handsome, very George Clooney-esque. Their kids were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, very cute. They absolutely adored their parents. Dad would help the kids and mom settle in at the house and then fly back to Cali for work. I babysat 3 to 5 times a week, 6:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. Mom would get all dolled up, leave her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and come home very late, clearly drunk, and sometimes brought men home with her that she introduced as her friends. She would often overpay me, which I never complained about, but I worried for the kids. A significant amount of couples have this arrangement. Not saying they do, but you'd be surprised what people do with their marriage. A family member has a similar arrangement. Their husband decided he was tired of the wife, so he started cheating on her and eventually got a long-term girlfriend. After a couple years, the wife found out. They went to counseling where he told her that he was not going to stop. It was her choice what she wanted to do about it. They met with an attorney to get divorced and discovered how much it would cost. Also, she realized that she would not be able to maintain her lifestyle, mansion, nice cars, good school system for the kids, etc. So they decided to stay married and basically live like roommates. She presents the facade of a perfect family in non-stop Facebook posts / everything is happy. Her friends post fawning replies about how she has such a perfect family. Meanwhile, they live in separate bedrooms and barely speak to each other. He's gone every weekend with the girlfriend. Her entire life revolves around their child who is rapidly growing up. This has been going on for 8 years now. I can't possibly tell people how to live their lives. I do, but they sure don't have to listen. But this doesn't sound healthy for anyone in the long run. I know it would be difficult and expensive, but the cost to long-term happiness sounds like a bad deal to me. Story 3. I was babysitting for my neighbors, and they were super nice people. 2 kids, very Pottery Barn people. They would always come home late with no cash to pay me, but they'd come by my house literally the next day with the cash, so I never minded. But I was always a little confused as to how they spent all their cash at dinner and a movie and somehow didn't plan to pay the sitter, and how they managed to stay out till 3 a.m. just doing dinner and a movie. And they were pretty wealthy, so it wasn't like a waiting till payday thing. Once before they left, when they were in the other room saying goodbye to the kids, I went to move the wife's purse and saw a really big roll of singles. I brushed it off, but then another time their daughter had an allergic reaction and I texted them an SOS. When I got a call back, I picked up and heard club music. It was a couple of sittings after that when I left through the back door and saw the husband in the garage shaking glitter off their clothes that I realized they were probably going to a strip club. When I went to college, they switched to using my sister as a sitter, and I sat down with her and explained where they went and not to ask or act suspicious. They were good parents, and it's not like a problem. It was just super not the vibe they gave off, and I kind of found it hilarious. Story 4. I used to babysit for my next-door neighbor who had an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. I was 13 when I started babysitting for them, and I knew off the bat the kids were an interesting duo, to say the least. And I have too many stories to tell from when I was watching them. We all went to school together, so when I got off the bus, we'd walk to their apartment and I'd watch them, made sure we got homework done, and made them the snack of the day. One day we had a half day at school, and I think the mom forgot because when we walked into the apartment, I heard one of the doors shut. At the time, we thought it was an intruder, so I grabbed the 5-year-old's baseball bat, told them to stay in the room, and I'd do some investigating. I opened the bathroom door, and there was the mom, half naked, with a guy that wasn't her husband. She gave me all the money in her wallet and her business card. She was a photographer. and told me to never speak of it again. I caught her cheating and made out with $400 and a $650 photo shoot package. Took pictures for all my upcoming holidays so I could keep getting gifts to my family. I babysat them for around 3 months after before they moved away. No, you don't understand. I'm just doing an at-home photo shoot and the camera caught on fire. No, wait, it's a nude photo shoot for an art show. And I'm also naked because, look kid, here's some cash and a coupon. Now go turn the TV volume up high and let me finish. Story 5. I babysat a lot when I was 13 to 15. At the time, I lived in a small town. I was a very popular babysitter, and I also work at the daycare center. Often I would have kids from 2 or 3 different families at once. I didn't care. I got triple the pay for having 3 different groups of kids. I was recently told why I always had groups of kids like that. Turns out the small town had a swingers club, and I was the go-to babysitter for their different groups. Story 6. I was babysitting at my neighbor's house. They were a young couple, early 30s, with 2 kids aged 5 and 8. I was 16 at the time, and the first question they asked me was if I had a boyfriend and if I was a virgin, because they didn't want me seeing boys while babysitting. I think part of the reason they asked this is because they were pretty wild themselves and probably did crazy stuff when they were younger and babysitting. When they found out I smoked, they always left some cigarettes for me. They always told me that they'd be home around 12 or 1, but most of the time I would fall asleep and they would stumble home completely drunk around 3 at night. They'd give me way too much money as an excuse, which I obviously didn't mind. After a while, the dad started messaging me online, first just asking innocent questions, but after a while, they became more intimate in nature. I told him I didn't feel comfortable with that, so he stopped. They broke up a while later and the mom started throwing wild parties at their home. I randomly walked by with a friend of mine once and she invited us in and gave us a beer. Me and my friend felt pretty cool. Here we are at a grown-up party having beers until the mom came up to us to offer us some drugs. We were shocked and declined and left the party quickly after that. I told my parents a couple of years later about all this after the mom and kids moved, and they were outraged. Apparently, they always acted like they were very respectable. I mean, what drugs was the mom offering? Were they respectable drugs or not? Let's not jump to conclusions. But look, I know I joke, but on a more serious note, I do hope at least those parents were better about making sure their kids were safe and well taken care of. Story 7. I was babysitting once and the kids were wrestling in the living room. All of a sudden, the smell of dank filled the room. I hear the kids stop and say, "What is that?" One of them had knocked over a big tin can on a shelf and the parents' weed stash spilled everywhere. I sent the kids away and cleaned it all up for them and put it back. Put half back? Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 8. I worked at the daycare center. To be clear, these parents did not seem very normal. Mom had fake inflated Kardashian-sized boobs and butt and was generally very conceited, like almost a stereotype of a person with a body that augmented. She stood out among the other parents who picked up their kids from the daycare after working 12-hour shifts, scrubbing floors, and doing other blue-collar labor, large immigrant community. Dad was more down-to-earth, so it seemed. Younger brother, age 7, told me he was anxious one day. He tended to be a worrywart, so I wasn't surprised, but I asked him why. He says that his daddy yells at his mom a lot because she gets drunk, goes out and parties with her friends, then he has to go and pick her up, which leads to a lot of arguing. I told him that that's really sad and that we would say a prayer for them. It was a Christian daycare. A week or so later, he excitedly told me that the prayers worked and his parents weren't arguing anymore. I was only tentatively optimistic about younger brother's revelation. Older brother 8 was a completely different personality, a bully to the kids and adults, never had a positive thing to say. The thing he seemed to like were his younger brother, Fortnite, and Roblox, like you do. Most of the school year, we have butted heads trying to get him to do homework, but toward the end of the year, his behavior changed. He would say he was too stupid to do homework and would try to hold his breath to try and commit self-termination, in his own words. This seemed like a huge red flag, and he eventually broke down and said that his dad was abusive towards him and that his mom says she doesn't like being around him. While he was prone to lying, he was crying, something he never did, and his behavior was like nothing me and my coworkers had never seen. That was my first time calling CPS, and when the next school year started, those kids didn't come back. You did the right thing. Yeah, whether or not a kid might have a tendency to lie, you never want to take claims of abuse lightly. Abusive kids is just something I have no patience for. Breaks my heart. Story 9. I never really babysat for anyone besides family, but I did dog sit for a woman and her husband for a while. She gave me a tour of the house the first time I went over there, and there was a room in the back of the house that was filled with different intimate toys. She sold them as a side hustle and wanted me to know they were there in case I wasn't comfortable. They paid me well and left a great review on the site I was using. I wish they never moved, lol. I loved their dogs. Story 10. Not so much as dark, but really sad. I babysat for a typical upper-middle-class family. Dad worked, mom was staying at home. The mother was always a little unproductive, like checking on their daughter the second they got home, but I didn't think much of it. One night they came home and we talked a little. She mentioned how much she loved children and her daughter, so I asked her if they ever thought about having another. She completely broke down and explained that she had multiple miscarriages before and after her daughter, so they stopped trying. I felt really awful and really sad because it seemed like she wanted another baby. I hope they maybe considered adopting. An adopted kid is no less your kid than one you give birth to. It's all about love and raising them. Story 11. I was babysitting for a local family who owned car dealerships. I answered the phone, hello, as one does, and it was the father who didn't know his wife had hired a babysitter so she could go to an appointment. He started with the stupidest, naughty voice until he realized it wasn't his wife. He hung up. Later, he was caught cheating. Story 12. When I was 13 to 14-ish, I used to babysit 2 kids while their parents went to Amway functions. One night, for whatever reason, I looked behind the couch and saw a bunch of magazines. I collected them thinking they'd been dropped behind there by accident by the kids I babysat. It was a huge stash of Penthouse and Playboy magazines, and I had to quickly re-hide them before the kids saw them. I was curious naturally, but I told the mom when she drove me home. I don't recall if she said anything or not, but I stopped babysitting her kids shortly after that because I moved away. Why would the stash of dirty magazines be hidden behind the couch? That feels like such an easy place for kids to find them. I love to build forts by moving furniture as a kid, but apparently in that house, instead of a fort, I would be pitching a tent. I suck. Story 13. I babysat for the local policeman when I was a teenager. He always came home very drunk and in a weird mood, and one time brought out a homemade Ouija board and persuaded me to take part with his buddies. Always paid me really well. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.